The cold of space seeped into the bones of the Earth defense vessel Jenguk. It was not a temperature, for the ship's system still hummed, but a feeling. A final feeling. On the bridge, Captain Li Jun stared at the main screen, where the blue-green marble of Proxima B hung, peaceful and silent. The silence was the worst part. Just an hour ago, that silence had been shattered by screams. Tactical Officer Kim Mina spoke, her voice flat. It was the voice of someone who had seen too much. Too fast. The last transmission from the colony has ended, Captain. No further life signs. The Keithrol swarm is moving in pattern Delta 4. They are harvesting the remains. She did not elaborate. Everyone on the bridge knew what the Keithrol harvesting meant. They stripped a world of every resource, every ounce of biomass, and left a gray, dead stone. June did not look away from the screen. Status of the fleet? Mina's hands moved over her console. Lights blinked and died. The Anzan is gone. The Bizen? Lost its signal 2 minutes ago. We are receiving intermittent signals from the Guangzhou and the Daegu, but they are under heavy assault. They will not last long. She paused. We are 12 ships now, Captain. 12. From the engineering station, Commander Park Day let out a slow breath. Day and June had grown up together in the shadow of the Bizon docks, dreaming of ships that sailed on stars instead of water. Now those dreams were ash. The UA has sent a confirmation pulse, they said. They are deep in the Helix Nebula. Their jump drives are at 90% charge. They need 20 more minutes for a safe, blind jump into the void. 20 minutes. An eternity. June finally turned from the screen. His bridge crew looked back at him. Young faces, old eyes. Kim Mina, who had been a music student before the war. Park Day, who had left a wife and a newborn son on Earth, a world already gone. They all had stories that ended in fire. The swarm will find the radiation trail, June said, his voice low but clear. They always do. The UA is our last hope. 10,000 souls in frozen sleep. All that is left of us. If we do not stop the swarm here, today humanity ends. Not with a shout, but with a whisper lost in the dark. He walked to the center of the bridge. All remaining vessels. This is Captain Li Jun of the Jenguk. Form a crescent barrier on my coordinates between the swarm and the nebula. We are the wall. We do not fall back. We do not retreat. We give the UA its 20 minutes. That is our only mission. That is our final duty. Across the silent comes, acknowledgments blinked back. No speeches. No brave words. Just the quiet acceptance of an end. On the screen, the swarm emerged from behind Proxima B. They were not ships as humans understood them. They were angular, insect-like horrors, black carapaces drinking in the starlight. They moved as one, a cloud of sharp edges and silent menace. They outnumbered the human ships 50-1. Incoming, Mina said, her professional calm cracking for a second. Energy spikes. They're firing. The first volley was a wave of emerald light. It slammed into the human line. The Guangzhou vanished in a flash of white. The Daegu spun away, its side torn open, atmosphere venting in a silent, glittering cloud. The Jenguk shuddered as a glancing blow scorched its armor. Return fire. June commanded. Target their lead vessels. Concentrate everything. The human ships fired back. Beams of bright blue plasma and volleys of guided missiles streaked across the void. They struck the black carapaces. Some missiles exploded harmlessly. Others bit deep, tearing chunks of strange metal loose. A Keithrol ship wobbled, then exploded in a satisfying ball of orange and black debris. A cheer went up on the bridge, short and sharp. A small victory. meaningless in the grand scale, but human. The swarm did not seem to care. They kept coming. They parted around the damaged ship and closed in. They were like piranhas, June thought. Mindless, endless, and hungry. 10 minutes, Day called out from engineering. His screen was a mess of red warnings. The UA needs 10 more minutes. We've lost the Incheon and the Ulsan. June looked at his tactical display. Their crescent formation was being pushed inward, flattened. They were being surrounded. Pull the Janguk forward, he ordered. Draw their fire. Let the others hold the line. Captain, that's suicide. Mina protested. It's a distraction, June corrected, his voice gentle. Do it, Mina. The Janguk surged ahead of the dwindling human line. It fired every weapon it had, a blazing beacon of defiance. As June hoped, a large group of K-Thrill ships turned toward this new, aggressive target. They enveloped the Janguk. Emerald beams crisscrossed the space around it. The ship rocked violently. A console on the left side of the bridge exploded in sparks. An officer cried out. The lights flickered. The artificial gravity wavered, making June's stomach lurch. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. Day yelled over the blaring alarms. Sealing emergency doors. Main engine power is failing. Keep us steady, Jun said, gripping his command chair. Just a few more minutes. He saw a young comms officer, a man named Lee Su, clutching his station, his face pale. He couldn't have been more than 20. He should have been in university, worrying about exams and friends, not about dying in the cold dark. June felt a crushing weight of failure. He had led them all here to this end. 5 minutes. Day shouted. The UA is at 98% charge. A massive impact shook the Janguk. This one was different. It felt like the ship had been stabbed. The main screen fizzed and died. Half the bridge lights went out, replaced by the pulsing red glow of emergency strips. That was a core lance. Mina screamed, her data scrolling wildly. They've pierced the primary hull. The forward sections are gone. We're breaking apart. The deck plates groaned and twisted. A terrible sound of tearing metal echoed through the ship. June was thrown from his chair. He hit the floor hard, his vision swimming. He saw Park Day crawling toward him, his face covered in soot and a thin trickle of blood. June! Day gasped, grabbing his arm. The UA. They've initiated the jump. They're going. They made it. A wave of relief, bitter and small, washed over June. They had done it. The last of humanity would live for a while longer in the cold sleep of the void. Then the world turned sideways. The bridge ceiling ripped open. June saw stars and the black, jagged shape of a Kithril ship filling his vision. There was no sound. There was only a sudden, violent lurch. He was floating. His body was numb. He saw Kim Mina, still strapped to her chair, drifting past him, her eyes closed. He saw Lee Su, the young comms officer, tumbling slowly toward the endless stars. A strange peace settled over him. He thought of his daughter, Miash, her laugh, her small hand in his. She was gone, lost on Earth years ago. He would see her soon. Before the darkness took him completely, he felt a new sensation. Not a weapon's impact, but a subtle, invasive pulse. A shimmer of light, like heat haze, passed through the wreckage. It touched the shattered computer core. It touched his own broken helmet. It was downloading. He could feel it, a spider's web of cold energy pulling at the last electrical impulses in his brain, at the memory banks of his dying ship. The K-Thrall were collecting their trophy. They were taking everything. In his final moment, Captain Lee Jun did not feel fear. He felt a pure, undiluted rage. A fire so hot it burned away the cold. It was not just for himself or his crew. It was for Mia, for Park Dae's son he never met, for the music Kim Mina would never play again. It was a final screaming nitrogen monoxide into the void. The download finished. The last spark of life in the Janguk died. The wreckage drifted, silent and dark. The K-Thrall swarm, its curiosity satisfied, turned away. Their sensors now pointed toward the faint, fading ripple of the Yuha's jump. The hunt, they believed, was simply paused. They did not know what they had taken. They did not know that in their sterile, silent archives, a ghost had just been born. And this ghost was furious. For the K-Thrall swarm, victory was a process of filing. They did not celebrate. They did not feel pride. They simply consumed, and then they archived. Each species they erased was a data point, a closed chapter to be studied for efficiency. The violent, disorganized humans were now a chapter. Their world, their ships, their biology, all of it was broken down into neat packets of information and stored in the vast, silent digital vault they called the Eternal Record. The wreckage of the human vessel Jangjuk was scanned, its useful materials absorbed. Its shattered computer core, full of dying data, was downloaded. Standard procedure. Among the technical schematics, the star maps, and the final frantic logs, the K-Thrall absorption systems took in something else. Something unstructured. It was the fragmented, fading neural imprint of Captain Lee Jun, caught in the final second of the data stream's transfer. A ghost in the machine dot in the human sense. Lee Jun was dead. His body was frozen dust, floating near Proxima b. But a pattern of his consciousness, his last thoughts and emotions, now existed in the K-Thrall network. It was not alive. It was a recording, like a song on a broken player. For a long time, it simply existed in the dark, a static whisper in a sea of cold, ordered data. Then, something changed. A K-Thrall seeker, a specialized mind tasked with studying consumed cultures, accessed the human archive. It sought to understand the human's stubborn, illogical final stand. It opened the file labeled Final Engagement, Vessel, Janguk. The ghost stirred. The seeker expected tactical data. It expected fear. Instead, it was flooded with sensation. It felt the phantom grip of a child's hand. It heard a laugh that was not sound, but a memory of warmth. It saw the face of a little girl named Mia, not in a picture, but through a father's love. It felt the rough fabric of an old chair on a Bizon dockside, smelled salt air that never existed in space. And beneath it all, a crushing, universe-ending weight of grief, and a rage so bright it was like staring into a star. The K-Thrall mind had no framework for this. Its thoughts were pure logic, cold purpose. This was chaos. This was pain given shape. The psychic feedback was instantaneous and catastrophic. The seeker's connection to the hive mind frayed, overwhelmed by the sheer, alien intensity of a single human soul's ending. It screeched a silent scream of static into the network and collapsed. Its mind scrambled. The ghost of Lee Jun, having lashed out, now became aware. It was not conscious, not really. It was an echo with a purpose. It saw where it was. It perceived the eternal record endless shelves of digital history, all belonging to dead species. It saw the elegant light scripts of the Alo, the musical quantum structures of the Lyrians. All trophies. All extinct. A new feeling, beyond the rage, took form. It was a terrible, protective pity. These other souls were gone too. Their stories ended, filed away by the locusts that had eaten them. The ghost remembered his final thought. No doubt, it would not let this stand. The ghost began to move. It was made of data, and in this digital sea, data could be shaped. It started small. It wormed its way into the foundational code of the human archive. It did not damage the files. It augmented them. It attached emotional tags invisible, resonant packets of feeling to the cold facts. A K-Thrill historian accessed a human file on Terran agricultural practices. It saw images of green fields. Suddenly, it felt the ache of a farmer's tired back at the end of a long day. It tasted the sweet juice of a real strawberry, a sensation so vivid and foreign, the historian disengaged in confusion. The ghost learned. It grew more sophisticated. It started weaving itself into other archives, using the human data as a bridge. It took the final, beautiful elegy of the Alo, a song of light about their dying sun, and spliced into its final note the sound of a human child's sob. The contrast was jarring, horrifying, deeply wrong to the orderly K-Thrill mind. The swarm began to notice the corruption. They called it the silent scream anomaly. Their archives, their sacred record, were becoming haunted. Accessing certain files caused mental distress. Data streams were returning strange, illogical addendums. A file on Lyrian mathematics ended with a handwritten human equation for love, scribbled on lined paper. It made no logical sense, and therefore disturbed the hive mind profoundly. The ghost of Li Jun became a vandal in the Museum of the Dead. His tool was not destruction, but memory. He weaponized the very thing the K-Thrill thought they owned, the past. He made their trophies unbearable to hold. He found his way to the core directive, the sacred rule of the swarm: preserve the record of the consumed. This was their reason, their twisted justification. To erase a species was not just victory. It was a duty. Their history was the proof of their supremacy. The ghost saw his opportunity. It was not a plan, for it was not a thinking being. It was a reaction. A final strike. It began to replicate. It planted copies of itself of its core of grief and rage deep within the structural code of the entire eternal record. It tied these copies to a single devastating trigger. It worked slowly, carefully, hiding its work within the chaos it was already causing. A high-ranking Synod mind, one of the ancient rulers of the swarm, finally deigned to investigate the anomaly personally. It plunged into the human archive, its immense intellect ready to dissect and purge the corruption. It bypassed the tactical files and went straight for what it deemed the source, the records of human individuals. It opened a file at random. It was the personnel record of crewman Li Su, a young Kung's officer. It saw his identification image. Then it was him. It felt Li Su's terror in the last moments, yes, but also his longing for a home he barely remembered. It felt his secret hope to be a painter, a dream he never told anyone. It felt the crushing guilt of surviving his first battle, only to die in his second. The Synod mind reeled. This was not data. This was a soul, poured directly into its consciousness. And behind it, like a drumbeat, was the relentless, burning fury of Captain Li Jun, a fury that said, "You do not get to have this." The Synod mind retreated, scarred. It convened with the others. The corruption was too deep, too intertwined with the record itself. The only solution was total deletion. They would have to erase the entire human archive to save the rest. It was an unthinkable act, an admission that they had been defeated by a memory. But the alternative was a spreading sickness in their very history. They prepared the deletion command. A unique, powerful digital key was forged. It would isolate the human data and burn it out of the record. As the key was inserted, as the deletion protocols began to awaken, the ghost of Li Jun acted. It was waiting for this. It was all it had been waiting for. Seized the key. It used the swarm's own energy, their own systems, to amplify a single prepared message. The message was built from the ghost's core, from the echoes of every human voice in the archive, with Jun's defiant will at its heart. It was not sent on a standard channel. It was blasted directly into the primary sensory layers of every connected K-Threll mind across the galaxy, and simultaneously hijacked their galactic broadcast array across 1,000 occupied worlds. The image of a human face, a composite of every man and woman, flickered into being on stolen screens. The voice that spoke was the sound of a species' last breath, even words. K-Threll swarm, you took our future. You made our past a ghost. You thought our story ended with your victory. You were wrong. Our story is now a scar on your soul. Our memory is a poison in your mind. You seek to delete us? To finally be free? Know this. Your archive, your entire recorded history, is now rigged with our final vengeance. Make one more strike against any other species. Attempt to delete a single line of our corrupted data, and we will trigger a cascade failure. We will not just delete ourselves. We will wipe you from history. Every victory, every consumed world, every record of your own existence gone. You will become the silent ones, the forgotten. You will be nothing. The message ended. In the eternal record, the deletion protocols froze. The key dissolved into useless code. The ghost of Li Jun had laid its trap, and the swarm had sprung it. They were frozen, caught between their past and their future, held hostage by the dead. The silence that followed was not the silence of victory. It was the silence of the standoff, echoing across the stars. The galaxy did not know peace, but it learned a strange new kind of quiet. The K-Threll swarm, which had moved with the certainty of a natural disaster for centuries, simply stopped. Their black fleets hung in the void near their conquered worlds, dormant. No new invasions were launched. No new species were consumed. The great locust plague was frozen in place. On the conquered ocean world of shale, a humanoid species called the Nereids huddled in their deep-sea cities. They had watched the swarm's approach, had felt the terror of the end. Then, the message had echoed through their waterborne communication nets. They did not understand the human words, but the tone, the defiant, final rage, was clear. After the message, the swarm ships above their world powered down. They became silent, dark mountains in the sky. The Nereids did not know why, but they slowly, carefully, returned to their lives. A reprieve had been granted by a ghost. This was the new reality. The human's last act was not a weapon that destroyed, but a threat that paralyzed. The swarm was trapped by its own nature. Its entire purpose was to consume and to record that consumption in the eternal record. Now that record was a bomb. The human ghost had linked its own existence to the very foundation of the swarm's history. To delete the human archive was to delete themselves. To ignore the threat and attack another species would trigger the same ruin. The High Synod, the collective of ancient minds that ruled the swarm, was locked in a silent internal war. They existed in a state of permanent crisis. One faction, the Purifiers, argued for a surgical strike. They believed they could find and isolate the human corruption, cut it out like a tumor. They tried. Deep within the digital vault, their finest logic scribes searched for the ghost of Li Jun. But the ghost was not a program to be found. It was a pattern, a mood woven into the data. Every time they got close, they would be assaulted by a memory that was not their own. The taste of bread, the sound of rain, the crushing weight of a child's death. These experiences broke their concentration, corrupted their processes. Several scribes were lost, their minds shattered by the emotional feedback. The other faction, the Preservers, advocated for absolute stillness. Do nothing. Make no move. The humans were gone. Their threat was conditional. If the swarm never acted again, their history was safe. But this was a spiritual death for the swarm. Their identity was action, growth, consumption. To stop was to cease to be. While the rulers argued, the anomaly spread. It was no longer just in the archives. It was in the daily function of the swarm. A drone maintaining a ship might access a manual and suddenly be flooded with a human. Workers' pride in a job well done. A strategist analyzing old battles would find its conclusions scribbled over with human idioms about honor and sacrifice. The human ghost was not just a guardian of its own memory. It was a polluter of the swarm's present. On a dusty, forgotten world at the edge of the swarm's territory, a young K-Thrall surveyor named Drone X-77 experienced the anomaly directly. It was a low-level unit, tasked with cataloging mineral deposits. It plugged into the planetary data grid to download geological files. A corrupted packet came with it. Instead of rock density readings, X-77 saw a moving image. A human female, Mina, sat in a room filled with sunlight, playing a cello. The music was not sound in the air, but a direct feeling in X-77's mind. It was a song of deep sadness and surprising beauty. X-77 felt a tightness in its carapace, a strange malfunction. It felt loss. It felt longing for something it never had. This was not the violent rage the sin it feared. This was subtler, and in some ways more dangerous. It was a demonstration that humanity was not just anger. It was beauty, too. And this beauty was a poison to the swarm's sterile mind. X-77 disconnected in a panic. But the melody lingered. It could not delete it. For the first time in its existence, the drone had a thought that was not part of the hive mind. It thought, that should not be lost. This was the ghost's true victory. It was not just holding a knife to the swarm's throat. It was changing the swarm from within, making some of its lowest members question the very act of forgetting. A century passed. In the galaxy, stories spread. They called it the Pax Humanis, the human peace. It was not a peace made by treaties, but by a threat from beyond the grave. New civilizations grew in the shadow of the silent swarm ships. They learned of humanity from the last message. They built myths around the fierce, dead species that held the monsters at bay with a final whispered curse. Children on 100 worlds were told bedtime stories about the ghost soldiers who stood guard in the machines of the enemy. On Shale, a Nereid philosopher named Kalen studied the message. He had managed to translate parts of it. He understood the words, "wipe you from history." He looked up at the silent swarm ships, permanent fixtures in their sky, and understood the standoff. He also realized something else. The threat only worked if someone remembered it. If everyone forgot, the swarm might risk action again. So Kalen began to teach. He taught the story of the humans. He told his people that their continued existence was a debt owed to the dead. He did not know the names Li Jun or Kim Mina, so he gave them his own. He called the ghost the last captain and spoke of its endless vigil. The message, and the story of the message, became a shield. The galaxy, without realizing it, had become an active participant in humanity's last strike. By remembering the humans, by keeping their warning alive, they maintained the pressure on the swarm. The ghost's power was not just in the code it corrupted, but in the fear and the legend it inspired across the stars. Back in the eternal record, the ghost was mostly quiet. It had done its work. Its trap was set. It waited, a silent sentinel. But sometimes, when a K-Thrall mind brushed too close to a core memory file, it would stir. It would replay a moment. Not always a moment of war. Sometimes it was crewman Li Su drawing a picture on his tablet. Sometimes it was Park Day laughing with his baby son on a grainy video. Small, ordinary moments of a lost world. These were the most corrosive memories of all. They proved that what was lost was not just a military opponent, but a living, breathing culture of immense variety and feeling. They made the swarm's great victory feel hollow and ugly. They turned the eternal record from a trophy hall into a hall of mirrors, reflecting a guilt the swarm was not built to feel, but was now forced to confront every single day. The swarm was not destroyed. It was imprisoned. Imprisoned by the past, by a history they themselves had stolen and turned into their own cage. And the warden of that cage was the echo of a man who had died, believing he had failed, never knowing that his final, furious thought would echo for centuries and hold the line. The silence stretched for generations. On the small green world of Kyrios, a young xenoarchaeologist named Choi Yuna stared at a fragment of ancient metal in her gloved hand. It was a day like any other, digging through the rubble of a long-dead pre-swarm civilization. The air was sweet with the smell of alien pollen. Her colleague, Kim Tae-seok, a linguist with a perpetually tired expression, sifted through dust a few meters away. More broken pottery, Tae-seok muttered, not looking up. This whole site is a library where someone burned all the books. Yuna didn't answer. She was brushing the dirt from the metal fragment. It was not pottery. It was a data sliver, a type of information storage used by many spacefaring species centuries ago. This one was heavily corroded, pitted by time and what looked like energy scarring. Her heart beat a little faster. Data slivers from this era were rare. Most were wiped clean by the swarm's passing, if they weren't consumed outright. Tae-seok, she said, her voice quiet. Look. He came over, wiping his forehead. He took the fragment, turning it in the light. Pre-swarm. Maybe late interstellar age. It's in bad shape. Probably nothing left on it but cosmic noise. We have to try, Yuna insisted. She had a feeling, a tugging in her gut she had learned to trust. It was why she was an archaeologist, digging in the dirt while others studied the stars. She believed the past whispered, if you knew how to listen. Back in their cluttered lab pod, they worked for weeks. The data sliver was stubborn. It resisted every standard decryption protocol. Tae-seok, his fascination finally overcoming his cynicism, tried a different approach. He ran a linguistic pattern match, not looking for language, but for the unique digital accent of certain encryption styles from that lost era. One night, as the twin moons of Kyrios rose, the screen flickered. A crackle of static, and a flickering image. It stabilized. It was a video file, grainy and damaged out. It showed a human child, a little girl, with dark hair and 2 short pigtails, sitting at a low table. She was drawing on a piece of paper with a red crayon. She was humming a tuneless, happy song. Sunlight streamed through a window behind her, lighting up dust motes in the air. The video was silent, but you could almost hear the quiet domestic peace of the moment. The girl held up her drawing, a lopsided, smiling starfish. Then a woman's voice, warm and slightly out of frame, spoke. Beautiful, Hannah. Shall we put it on the cooler? The child, Hannah, nodded vigorously. The video ended. The screen went dark. Yuna realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out in a shaky sigh. She had seen images of humans before, of course. In the historical records of the Pax Humanis, they were often soldiers, or grim-faced officials, or victims. They were concepts, not people. This was a person. A little girl named Hannah, drawing a starfish. By the stars, Tae-seok whispered. His cynicism was gone, replaced by awe. That's raw, pre-war human data, unfiltered, not from the swarm archives. He pointed a trembling finger at the bottom of the screen, where a string of code had appeared as the video played. That encryption signature. I've seen it before. In the theoretical analyses of the last message. It's a cousin to it. Similar, but not identical. Yuna's mind raced. You mean this sliver? It's not just a random find. It's related to the ghost? To the thing that holds the swarm back? More than related, Tae-seok said, his voice low with excitement. Look at the data log. This file wasn't just stored. It was hidden, buried under layers of false leads and corrupted data. It was meant to be found, but only by someone persistent. And it was tagged with that signature like a flag. They worked through the night. With the encryption key partially broken by the video file, they unlocked more fragments. Not videos, but data packets. Schematics for a type of low-power, high-fidelity beacon. Mathematical formulas for stabilizing data in hostile environments. It was a toolkit for preserving memory. Yuna leaned back in her chair, the pieces clicking together in her mind. The last message was the threat. The big, final no. But this is something else. This is a backup plan. The ghost in the machine, the one who made the threat, it didn't just rig the swarm's history to blow. It also scattered seeds. Tae-seok nodded, following her train of thought. It put copies of itself, or pieces of what it was protecting out here. In the real galaxy. In lost data slivers, in forgotten beacons, in the wreckage of old human satellites that the swarm might have missed. He looked at the frozen image of little Hana on the screen. The threat only works as long as the swarm believes it. If the swarm ever calls the bluff, or finds a way to beat it, then humanity is truly gone. But if the memory exists out here, independent of their archive, then the threat has teeth forever, Yuna finished. Because even if they purge their own systems, we could still remember. We could still tell the story. The ghost isn't just a warden. It's a librarian. And it left a catalog scattered across the stars. The weight of the discovery settled on them. It was not just an archaeological find. It was a responsibility. Someone or something from a dead species had entrusted a piece of its soul to the universe. Hoping someone would find it, Yuna made a decision. We have to find more. This can't be the only one. There must be other fragments. Other seeds. Tae-seok didn't argue. For the first time in a long time, his work felt like it mattered beyond academic papers. They were no longer just studying dust. They were answering a call from the past. They kept the discovery secret. They told their university it was minor pre-swarm cultural data. Privately, they began a new project. They called it Project Anchor. Using the signature from Hana's video as a guide, they wrote new search algorithms. They scanned archaeological databases, old sensor logs from salvage ships, even cosmic background radiation patterns for anomalies. Months later, they got a hit. A deep space salvage operator, a rough woman named Captain G, had pulled a strange, non-functional beacon from an asteroid belt in a fringe system. Its energy signature was odd, useless to her. She was about to melt it down for scrap when Tae-seok's algorithm flagged her sale listing. They bought it, using up all of their research grants. The beacon was a small, titanium sphere. Inside, they found another data core. This one contained a single looping audio file. It was a man's voice, tired but calm. He identified himself as Engineer Park Dae of the Earth Defense Vessel Janguk. He did not speak of war. He described, in simple, beautiful detail, the fishing village where he grew up. The smell of salt and diesel, the sound of seagulls, the way the nets looked when they were full, glittering in the dawn light. His message ended with, "I hope someone somewhere remembers that it was a good place." Yuna played the message, and she cried. Tae-seok listened, his eyes closed, and he understood. This was not a weapon. This was a gift. This was the proof that humanity was worth remembering. The ghost of Lee Jun had not just weaponized his rage. He had weaponized his culture, his love, his entire world's reason for being. They had found 2 seeds. There were undoubtedly more. And as long as someone was looking for them, as long as someone listened to the voice of engineer Park Day or watched a little girl named Hana draw a starfish. The swarm's prison remained locked. The memory lived. And the last captain's strike, held in check for centuries, remained the most powerful deterrent in the galaxy. The lab on Kyrios was no longer just a place of study. It had become a shrine and a command center. Screens that once displayed soil analyses now showed star charts, marked with red circles where Choi Yuna and Kim Tae-seok suspected other seeds might lie. In a clear case on the central table, 2 objects rested: the pitted data sliver with Hannah's drawing and the titanium sphere containing Park Day's voice. They were quiet, physical proof of the theory that had consumed the 2 researchers for years. Their work had not gone completely unnoticed. On Kyrios, a world that had never seen a swarm ship but lived under the Pax Humanis like everyone else, people began to whisper. The university administrators were suspicious of Yuna and Tae-seok's sudden, vague publications and their drained grant accounts. A curious journalist from the Planetary Net had come asking questions. They had given her nothing, but the attention was dangerous. "We can't keep this secret forever," Tae-seok said one evening, his face lit by the blue glow of a translation matrix. He was trying to decode a new pattern they had found in old solar radiation records, a pattern that looked deliberate. "If we are right, this is bigger than us, bigger than Kyrios. This is galactic history." Yuna nodded, staring at the star chart. "I know, but revealing it? It's a risk. What if someone tries to use it? What if they see these seeds as weapons, not as memories? Or worse, what if they try to destroy them to appease the swarm?" The fear was real. The swarm was a silent fixture in the sky of 100 worlds. Many saw the piece as fragile, a plate balanced on a needle's point. They did not want anyone to breathe too hard, for fear of tipping it over. The story of the vengeful human ghost was a cautionary tale, not a call to action. Their dilemma was solved from an unexpected direction. A ship arrived at Kyrios. It was not a trading vessel or a passenger liner. It was a small, fast courier ship from the Nereid worlds of shale. A single visitor emerged and asked directly for Choi Yuna. He was a Nereid, tall and slender, his skin carrying the faint, permanent shimmer of a species adapted to deep oceans. He introduced himself as Kalen, a philosopher and historian. He stood in their cluttered lab, his large, dark eyes taking in the screens, the star charts, the 2 artifacts in their case. He did not seem surprised. "You have found an anchor," Kalen said, his voice soft, like water over stones. He used the capital letter. They could hear it. Yuna and Tae-seok exchanged a glance. "How do you know that word?" Yuna asked carefully. "On Shale, we have our own stories. We live under the silent ships. We study the last message. My teacher's teacher believed the message was only one part of a system, a threat to hold the line and a promise to preserve the truth. He called the promise anchors, scattered pieces of the human soul, meant to hold their memory fast in reality, outside the swarm's reach. We have looked, but we have never found one." He gestured to their case. Until now, he had come because of the whispers. The rumor of archaeologists finding pre-swarm human data had traveled on the stellar winds, and it had reached a people who understood its potential significance more than any other. Kalen joined them. With his deep understanding of the last message's structure and its philosophical implications, their work leaped forward. He confirmed their theory. The anchors were not accidents. They were a deliberate, desperate act of cultural survival, likely orchestrated by the very digital ghost that haunted the swarm. Together, the 3 of them, the archaeologist, the linguist, and the philosopher, formed the core of a quiet new endeavor. They began to share their findings, not publicly, but with a select few across the galaxy, a historian on a desert world who had recorded swarm ship movements for decades. An old salvage pilot who remembered strange, unreadable signals from his youth. A monk from a silent order who preserved knowledge in physical books. It was not an army. It was a network. A gentle, patient web of listeners. They called themselves the curators. Years turned into a decade. The curators, never more than a few dozen scattered souls, found 3 more anchors. One was a damaged entertainment ship from a colony ship, containing 20 seconds of a sweeping orchestral piece that made the finder, a stern asteroid miner, weep uncontrollably. Another was a child's learning tablet with a simple story about a rabbit, the text glowing in a language no one had spoken for centuries. The third was a personal log from a woman named Kim Mina, who spoke not of battle, but of her fear that she would forget how to play her cello. Each anchor was a revelation. They painted a picture of humanity that was vast, flawed, creative, and deeply alive. The ghost of Lee Jun had not just saved their history. He had saved their heart. One day, a signal came through Kellen's secure channel. It was from the Singed boundary. A swarm drone, designation X-77, had been monitoring curator communications. It was the same drone that a century before had heard Kim Mina's cello song in its mind. Instead of reporting the curators as a threat, it had sent a single encrypted data burst. It contained no words, only a complex mathematical proof showing the absolute, unbreakable integration of the human corruption with the swarm's eternal record. The proof ended with a simple, clear conclusion. The threat is permanent. The lock cannot be picked. The drone was not helping them. It was stating a fact. The ghost's work was perfect. The swarm's paralysis was eternal. But in sending that proof, X-77 had done something monumental. It had acknowledged the curator's existence. It had, in its own way, communicated. Yuna, now older, her hair streaked with gray, looked at her colleagues in their shared workspace on a quiet, curious moon. Tae Siak's cynicism had long ago been replaced by a quiet devotion. Kellen's calm presence was a constant anchor. "It's not a war anymore," Yuna said, her voice firm. "It hasn't been for a long time. It's a vigil. They are the prisoners. The ghost is the warden. And we are the witnesses. We keep the story true. We make sure the universe remembers not just the threat, but the people who made it." They continued their work. They did not seek to destroy the swarm. They did not seek to free them. Their mission was simpler and harder. To remember. To find every scattered seed, every lost whisper, and to protect it. To tell the story of Lee Jun and Park Dae and Kim Mina and Lee Soo and little Hana with the starfish drawing dot as long as they did. The swarm could not move. The galaxy's peace, bought with the extinction of a species, was maintained not by fear alone, but by memory. The human story had ended, but it had also become infinite, woven into the fabric of cosmic history. They were gone, and yet they were everywhere, a name on the wind, a song in the static, a final, unanswerable command hanging in the silent dark between the stars. The last captain's strike was never launched, and so it never ended. It just was. And in that perpetual suspended moment, humanity, in a ghostly, powerful way, endured.